Hey everyone, I need to tell you something that happened to me last year. Something that changed the way I see family, loyalty, and even myself. I was invited to my younger sister's wedding, something that should have been a joyful occasion, a moment to celebrate a new chapter in her life. But from the moment I walked through those doors, I realized it wasn't about celebration at all. Wow. It was about showing me, in the most subtle and cutting ways, that I was never truly part of this family in the way I thought I was. And if you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people who are supposed to love you, you know exactly what I mean. Now, before I go any further, I want to ask you, the person listening to me right now, who are you? Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, because I want to know we're not alone in this world of strange, unfair moments. And if you like stories like this, I want you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up so we can keep sharing more stories that show how life can surprise you both in pain and in triumph. I arrived at the venue, a sprawling estate surrounded by manicured gardens and marble columns, and at first glance, everything looked perfect, like the pages of a magazine. But perfection can be a weapon when it is used to highlight what you don't have. My sister greeted me with a tight smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. And my parents nodded politely, their faces carefully neutral. Not a single word of warmth exchanged. Nothing that made me feel welcome. I tried to convince myself that maybe this was normal. Maybe they were just nervous or stressed by the day. But as soon as I took my seat, it became clear. Every detail of the wedding, every comment, every glance, was crafted to remind me that I had always been the afterthought, the one who could never measure up. The guests didn't know it, but the way they laughed at my attempts to join conversations, the way they complimented my sister's choices while ignoring mine, it was deliberate. It was a constant reminder that my achievements, my hard work, my life, none of it mattered here. I remembered every promotion I had earned, every late night I had spent building my career, every opportunity I had fought for. And in that grand hall filled with crystal chandeliers and expensive floral arrangements, it felt like none of it existed. The first blow came when my sister made a joke about me in front of the entire gathering, about how I was still single, still living in my own apartment, while she was marrying into wealth and security. Laughter rippled through the room, polite at first, but genuine in its amusement, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks. A mix of embarrassment and disbelief. Then came the whispers, the side glances, the subtle gestures from my parents, the way my father's eyes flicked over me like he was disappointed by my very presence. I tried to hold myself together, to smile, to laugh along, but inside, everything was twisting. I could feel the walls of the estate closing in, the air thick with judgment and silent condemnation. By the time dinner was served, I was exhausted, not physically, but emotionally, as if the weight of years of being undervalued had been concentrated into this single night. And then, just as I thought I might find a moment of reprieve, I overheard the conversation that would shatter me completely. My mother and sister were discussing the family trust, casually, as if I weren't standing there, as if I weren't listening. "We finalized the transfer last month," my mother said. Voice calm, untroubled, like she was talking about the weather. "Everything is now in Vivian's name, irrevocable, signed, notarized. She's ready for the future." My heart stopped. My chest tightened. Every memory of childhood, every effort to be seen and acknowledged, every quiet hope that my parents cared about me, all of it felt like a lie. I had been disinherited, erased from the family plan in the most final and formal way possible, on a night meant to celebrate life, love, and unity. I tried to speak, to ask why, but the words caught in my throat. My sister smiled at me with that same practiced charm, the one that hid everything underneath and made the world believe she was flawless. "It's just business," she said lightly, as if my life, my feelings, my very existence were an inconvenience. I left the table under the pretense of getting some fresh air, but I couldn't breathe. Outside, the evening air was cold and biting, and the gardens were silent, too quiet after the laughter and music of the wedding hall. I walked past the fountains, past the manicured hedges, my mind spinning, my hands trembling. I felt the familiar ache of invisibility, the sense that no matter what I accomplished, the people who should have seen me had chosen not to. And then I found myself in the small park across the street, a place I had walked past countless times, but never really noticed. A single bench sat beneath an old oak tree, its leaves rustling in the wind. I sank onto it, letting my suitcase fall to the ground beside me, and finally allowed myself to cry. The tears came slowly at first, then in waves, hot against the cold night. I thought about every birthday where my sister had received a bigger gift, every family dinner where my successes were ignored, every insult disguised as a joke. I felt the anger, the sadness, the exhaustion of years compressed into a single moment. And then I noticed her. An older woman, barefoot, her clothes thin, shivering in the cold, moving slowly across the empty park. Her skin was pale and tinged with purple, her eyes tired but alert. I hesitated, then stood, taking off my own coat, the only warm thing I had, and draped it over her shoulders. She looked up at me, eyes wide, and said nothing at first, just held my hand briefly and squeezed. In that simple gesture, something shifted inside me, a warmth that had nothing to do with the coat and everything to do with the fact that I had chosen kindness even when the world had shown me cruelty. She nodded once, softly, and shuffled away into the darkness, leaving me alone on the bench, cold but strangely lighter. I stayed there for a long while, staring at the ground, thinking about what had just happened, about the woman I had helped, about the life I had been forced to leave behind inside that estate. And for the first time that night I realized that even though my family had discarded me, even though I had been publicly humiliated, I still had something that no one could take from me: my heart, my dignity, and the ability to choose kindness. I walked back to my car, numb but determined, knowing that I couldn't change what had happened inside that hall, but I could decide what to do with the rest of my life. When I returned to the empty driveway, I checked my phone, trying to distract myself from the cold and the sting of betrayal. That is when I saw a message that would start the next chapter. An email from a woman named Claudia, representing a philanthropist I had never met, inviting me for a meeting that could change everything. I laughed quietly at first, thinking it was a prank, but something about the tone, the professionalism, the exactness of the details told me otherwise. I didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of a journey that would take me from the park bench where I had cried from the night that felt like the end of the world to a place where my decisions, my kindness, and my strength would finally be recognized and rewarded. That night, I didn't sleep much, thinking about the choices I had made, the life I had lived, and the path that was about to open in front of me. I realized something very important. Even when the people closest to you fail you, there is always a chance for a new beginning, for justice, for recognition, and for a life built on your own terms. And so I closed my eyes with the cold still biting at my skin, but with a quiet resolve forming inside me. Tomorrow, everything would begin to change. The next morning, I woke up in the small apartment I had rented for the week, my mind still replaying every detail from the night before. The betrayal, the laughter, the cold stares, they haunted me. But the email from Claudia lingered with a strange sense of possibility. I didn't know who this woman was, but she seemed to have been watching me, studying me, looking for something that no one else had bothered to notice. Hours later, I found myself standing outside a sleek office building in the heart of the city, trying to calm the nervous flutter in my chest. Claudia met me at the door. Tall, silver-haired, her expression serious but kind. She didn't smile, didn't offer a hand to shake, but there was a weight to her presence, the kind of authority that made you sit up straight without thinking about it. "You're here because someone noticed something about you," she said. "Someone who understands what it means to be overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. Follow me." I did, and we walked into a room where every detail screamed power and precision. But instead of intimidating me, it fueled a determination I hadn't realized I had. She explained that her employer, Madame St. Clair, had a tradition. Every year on a particular day, she would go out into the city, disguised as someone who had nothing, to find people who still had hearts capable of genuine kindness. People who, when faced with coldness and indifference, could still choose compassion. And this year, apparently, she had found me. I listened stunned as Claudia described how Madame St. Clair's team had been observing me, discreetly watching how I handled the betrayal at the wedding, how I treated strangers, how I responded when life gave me nothing and demanded everything. I felt my pulse quicken as the realization sank in. The moment I had given away my coat to the barefoot woman in the park had been noticed. Not just noticed, but judged worthy of opportunity. The next few months were intense, a whirlwind of learning and proving myself. Madame St. Clair didn't want me to simply be generous. She wanted me to be capable, to transform resources into real, lasting change. I spent days reviewing projects, learning how to manage programs that affected thousands, and nights poring over budgets and impact reports, struggling to understand the intricacies of large-scale philanthropy. Every evening, I thought back to the wedding, to the look of triumph on my sister's face, the cold indifference of my parents. That memory became fuel, a reminder of what it meant to stand on my own, to create a life where my value wasn't measured by their approval. Slowly, I began to understand the power of perspective. True influence isn't about wealth or titles. It's about the ability to make decisions that ripple outward and create real, tangible outcomes. The woman who had discarded me, the family who had ignored me, suddenly felt small and irrelevant compared to the work I was doing, the lives I was touching, the communities I was rebuilding. Months passed, and then came the day when Madame St. Clair herself sat across from me, sunlight streaming through the massive windows, casting long shadows that somehow made everything feel real. "You've shown me who you are," she said softly, eyes sharp and unwavering. "Not just when it's easy, not just when people are watching, but when it counts. I'm offering you a role, a responsibility, a chance to run a foundation that changes lives, because you know what it means to be discarded, overlooked, and underestimated. Do you accept?" I swallowed hard. The weight of the wedding, the betrayal, the countless nights spent wondering if I was enough, all pressing down at once. But this time, instead of fear, I felt clarity. I nodded. Yes. And with that, the course of my life changed completely. I was no longer defined by the people who had tried to diminish me. I was defined by the choices I made, the lives I could impact, the justice I could create through action. Soon, my parents and sister came back into the picture, as if expecting that my newfound position and influence would make them untouchable again. But I had learned my lesson. When they appeared, pleading for help, their wealth and status diminished by their own reckless decisions. I offered assistance, but only the same kind I would offer any stranger in need. Financial planning, guidance, support networks. Nothing more. No handouts, no indulgence, no forgiveness as a tool for complacency. They were forced to face the consequences of their actions, and I watched without bitterness because I had learned the most important lesson. Justice is not revenge. It is the integrity to act rightly even when the world has treated you wrongly. As I stood in the Foundation's main hall months later overseeing projects that ranged from housing for displaced families to educational programs for children who had no one to advocate for them, I thought back to that night at the wedding, to the cold park bench, to the coat that had made a difference in someone else's life. That act of kindness, small and unassuming, had led me to this place, this life where my worth was recognized, not by blood, but by character. And in that moment, I realized something else. Forgiveness doesn't mean reopening doors that hurt you. It means opening new ones for yourself and stepping through, leaving the old pain behind. The world may have tried to diminish me, to humiliate me, to make me feel invisible, but I had chosen differently. I had chosen integrity, courage, and kindness. And in return, the world had given me something far greater than anything I could have inherited. The opportunity to create lasting change, to be seen for who I truly am, and to build a life where no one would ever feel disposable again. As the sun set over the city, I walked through the foundation's courtyard, watching children play, families gather, the sound of laughter and life filling the air. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled, fully knowing that I was exactly where I was meant to be, that my choices mattered, and that even the deepest betrayals could lead to the most extraordinary transformations. Remember that no matter what the world throws at you, no one can take away your courage, your heart, or your integrity unless you allow it. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, stories of injustice, resilience, and triumph, make sure to subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up. We have so many more stories to share, and I want you to be a part of every one of them. Because no matter who tries to tell you that you don't belong, there is always a way to step through a new door and claim your own place in the world.